This is Voicemail, the Universal Postal Union's podcast covering the wonderful world of mail. I'm your host, Ian Kerr. In this episode, I'm joined by Tony Robinson, founder of global postal event Parcel+Post Expo. We're going to talk about the role and importance of technology and innovation in the postal world. Joining me is Tony Robinson. Tony is a CEO of UKi Media and Events and very well known in our sector as the founder of Post Expo. Tony, welcome. Before we get into things like Post Expo and looking towards the future, a look towards the past, first of all. Tony, can you just share with us your earliest memories of the Post?
Yeah, Ian, that's a very interesting question, really. And I suspect the answer to your question is probably licking a postage stamp and sticking it onto an envelope. And, I think everything that we're going to talk about is really to do with technology and how things have changed, the revolutions that the world's gone through in my period of time. And, nowadays you don't even lick the stamp. It comes with self-adhesive glue and you just peel it off something and stick it on. And I think it's probably indicative of how I'm interested in the technology that drives different sectors and especially not least the post. Because the technology of the thing that I first licked has changed from the very beginning onwards.
Tony, then let's just, while we're talking about the past, UKi has quite an impressive portfolio of events. You've got, I think it's 17 exhibitions and 12 conferences, not to mention 13 magazines. Looking back, how did all this start and what inspired you as an entrepreneur to sort of look towards the transport and logistics sector?
Yeah, good question. I really have always had a fascination with cars. And that really kicked off when I was a child, playing with little toy cars on the end of my bed. I got involved in the magazine publishing business, and actually things that I've done include I was the publisher of a magazine called Slimmer, second biggest selling slimming magazine in the UK in the late 1990s. At the other end of the portfolio of things I was involved with then, I had a magazine they're called Boat International, which is the world's leading super yacht magazine and still is. And, really the thing that drove me at any point, if I could attach myself to it, was anything to do with cars, automotive design, transportation, generally really was the bit that I was interested in. And I set up my own company in 1991. Very much on a small scale, very much it was a question of me, a desk, a phone, and a dog. And I sometimes chart my success on the basis of the fact that I've got up to 7 dogs, currently only 6, and maybe that's indicative of the pandemic, I don't know. But certainly my dog population's increased. The business has grown very successfully. And I spotted that transportation in the early 1990s, when the company was started, accounted for 18% of GNP globally. And I thought, well, look, I think I can live within an orbit of 18% of GNP. That'll do me. And it's my specialist area. It's what I enjoy doing and talking about. And that was it, really. That transportation it became. The post industry came about for us pretty early on. In 1995, I launched a publication on electric and hybrid vehicle design, electric and hybrid vehicle technology. And then just before that, I'd launched a publication in the traffic management industry. And this was interesting because it's what both of those things drew me into the world of the post. The reason for that is the posts were very early adopters and trialers of battery cars, fully electric vehicles. And actually, I got into discussions very early on with Deutsche Post in particular with a guy called Gunter Bohm, who was fantastically helpful in introducing us to technologies they were using. And they were trialing something they called zinc air batteries, zinc air lead batteries, I think they were, in the sort of period of 1995, 1996. The other thing I could see from the traffic industry was traffic operations centres were using big entire walls watching the traffic flows in their networks, in their highway networks. And I could see that the posts were beginning to use similar big screen, big whole wall technology um, to keep an eye on their fleets of vehicles traveling around their delivery networks. So there were great crossovers of technology, and that's what really got me starting to look at the post industry. And as I started to look at it, I could see there were some interesting sort of beginnings of revolutions going on. One thing that I latched onto was optical character recognition for reading handwriting on envelopes. And I thought, well, I love that. I'm a sort of gadget person. And you show me something that does optical character reading on envelopes, and I go, yummy, I love it. Show me something else. And there was a lot of things going on, the introduction of automation for sortation of letters and to a much lesser extent then parcels. So that's what sort of drew me into this particular sector.
Looking back then to the very first Post Expo, just can you share a few memories from that? What kind of technologies were exhibited at the time? And who do you recall being involved in sort of the speaking and things like that at that very first Post Expo?
Post Expo came about after we launched the magazine Postal Technology International. And initially in 1996, we launched the publication as a one off review of technologies which were developing and emerging in the post industry. And actually, when we published it, it was about April, May 1996. And the industry loved it. People were really surprised by some of the things that we'd latched onto. And that would have included optical character recognition of handwriting, and it would have included early stage sorting of parcels, would have had some references to electric vehicles for the silent delivery of letters in the early hours of the morning in cities. Silence was one of the great attributes in the early days of electric delivery vans. So we launched the publication in 1996. We published the second version of it in 1997. And by then it was apparent to me that this industry really could do with having um, an annual technology showcase, an annual event where the technology drivers, the companies that were pushing the frontiers of new things, could come and demonstrate the various things that they had going on. And we launched Post Expo in Hamburg in October 1997. It was a complete knockout success. And people that came along included a guy from UPU, and his verdict on what we'd done was he said, look, you've actually sort of transformed in one moment the way the Post sees itself, because the Posts are very traditional. They tend not to see themselves as high tech, forward moving, forward thrusting businesses. They're very traditional, really, in what they do. You've just rolled out a show full of technology for the post industry with about 150 exhibitors. And never before has the post industry really been able to look at itself and see itself as a high tech community. And that's really the thing that Post Expo changed, I think. It created a vision of an industry that saw itself historically as very traditional. Suddenly, actually, with all this new modern technology that was open to it, And it suddenly clearly defined the fact that an annual technology showcase was something that was really valid and worthwhile. Innovation, technical innovation, is the driver of opportunity. It's a driver of opportunity for posts to enter new sectors, new areas of activity, new ways of doing things. And we've always said over the years that it's really important that CEOs come to this show. And the reason it's really important is because CEOs, they're not technical, gadget driven people, but they are the people that can see strategic opportunities. And those strategic opportunities are being driven so much out of the technology that the clever companies are being busy creating, that it's really important CEOs of posts come to a show like this. They can see the technologies, they can see, because they are strategic people, the opportunities that these technologies are creating for their businesses. And it's very important. It's not just for the technical boffins, if you like, but it's a show for the CEOs to grasp the opportunities as well.
You mentioned earlier about the wide range of publications and shows that UKi Media and Events has. Um, Looking at that and your understanding and history, even with the postal sector, how do you see the position and the role of the traditional postal sector within this broader sort of transport, logistics, and technology industry?
Yeah. The interesting thing that we've seen um, is something that is ever so easy to overlook, and it's called a revolution. Now, when I got involved in looking at the post industry at the very beginning, the internet didn't really exist. There were ways of communicating electronically, but really fundamentally, the World Wide Web didn't exist. The internet as we know it today didn't exist. People posted letters to one another all over the world, thankfully. Um, and really the parcel delivery business was a very small business. In 1997, I spotted a new company emerging, the same as we all did, I guess, called Amazon. And to me, Amazon looked like a rather strange and quirky business. They were selling books online, and in those days, you used to not get online like we do now, expecting everything to work within nanoseconds, but you had to dial up on an ADSL line that made a very strange noise, and eventually something would pop up, maybe. You might even find your way to this thing called Amazon Books. And, in my opinion, it looked like a business that was losing a lot of money. I didn't really give it a great deal of hope. I couldn't understand why people wouldn't walk down the road still and buy a book out of a bookshop. And I was wrong. And the biggest transformation, and we've been through, actually, it's not a transformation, it's a revolution, is the internet. And the way people have transitioned into online shopping, which is accelerating even as we speak. And in the early 2000s, online shopping was new. Buying your groceries online wasn't something that people really did. Now, anything and everything is available online, and that is a complete transformation, revolution in the way people live and operate. And of course, it's given fantastic rise and rise and rise of the parcel delivery part of the business. And as we know, the letter end of the post business has really almost vanished. And I think it's a great shame in some respects, that the romance of sending letters has somewhat disappeared. And I think, we're going to find the next generation of kids are going to actually ask the questions about you did what? You wrote using a pen onto an envelope and put something inside it. You walked down the road with it, you put it in a box, somebody else came and picked it up and took it off in a van, and then it ended up in a sorting centre, and you just didn't send an email. It's going to become a thing of the past, sadly. I fear, some of the things that I rather like, including writing with a fountain pen and using a piece of paper, these things will die away, and people will cease to know how to write with a pen or a pencil. And the idea of posting and sending a letter will become almost a laughable piece of history.
Many bridges for us to cross before I think the letter becomes truly a part of history. But you've made a really good point about I suppose, the quantifiable impact of the internet on the postal world, not just in the loss of letter volumes, but in the growth in parcel volumes and so many other things. On this topic of technology, then, what, in your opinion, are the emerging technologies that could define the future of the postal sector? Are there any emerging technologies that you think should be on the radar of postal operators right now?
I think we're in an interesting phase of where online shopping and parcel delivery is, I would call it the chaotic phase. I think when you look at most technologies, particularly if they're applicable to a consumer environment, they go into a chaotic phase. And actually, if you look at the history of the motor car and you imagine a scene in any major city circa 1910 or 1920, the scene that you'll see will be fairly chaotic. There'll be maybe cars going in all sorts of directions, maybe not a very well managed highway environment. There'll probably be some horses and carriages in amongst them as well, and there's a bit of chaos going on. For me at the moment, the parcel delivery business is in that sort of early phase of a slightly chaotic environment where that there is a terrible quest for instant delivery. And, I find it quite worrying that I can buy a tube of toothpaste online, and it can be delivered to my house in the countryside the following morning. That actually isn't a very healthy condition, really. It's indicative of a fantastic thing going on with the speed with which parcels can be delivered, but that's not a really very good sustainable solution. And I would certainly like to see products categorized, and even if it's possible, people to be categorized so that I would be classified as somebody who really doesn't need to have a tube of toothpaste delivered by tomorrow morning. Maybe I should have thought about running out of toothpaste a little bit earlier. And maybe because I live where I live in the countryside, my deliveries should be consolidated, and maybe I can have a delivery once or twice a week. And that would say to me, we're out of the chaotic zone of a highly competitive range of companies competing with one another, really just to achieve speed of delivery and convenience. And we go into a phase of much more consolidated, careful planning of deliveries. And I might have a medical condition whereby I could get deliveries much more quickly. But it's a bit chaotic at the moment. And I think that'll sort itself out, and we'll head towards a much more sustainable solution. In amongst what I see going on, I certainly feel there is a fantastic opportunity for autonomous vehicles to become a mainstream part of the parcel delivery process. Deliveries, whether they're parcels or, for that matter, letters, which seem to me nowadays mostly to be invoices as opposed to anything more romantic. But I think really the delivery processes are very well suited to autonomous vehicles. they're running routes continuously, delivering to the same range of houses or offices or whatever. And therefore, programming and developing the AI that is required for autonomous vehicles to operate, it is a programmable, controlled environment that they're operating in, with a lot of variable parameters like traffic and pedestrians and other things to avoid. But there is great scope for the posts and the parcel delivery companies to be really early adopters, as they're already beginning to become, of autonomous vehicles, and of course robots of various shapes and sizes for the last mile application. Uh, and I think robots are a fabulous invention, have huge potential here for activities which, in certain weather conditions and climates, may be hazardous and difficult and really not perfectly suited to the human being. So there's great potential. I think autonomous vehicles and robotics are going to be the real uh, interesting short-term growth area and development area for the post. It'll be the next revolution, and it's already beginning to happen.
One of the things you touched on there, Tony, was the impact on the environment and sustainability. What about the technology that we're seeing in the delivery sector now? How can that help our sector reduce its environmental impact or even strive towards this idea of net carbon zero?
You know, at the moment, we're seeing a big growth of delivery activity, and it's going to take time to settle itself down into a pattern which actually really makes sense. Um, we're seeing, certainly in England, where I live, huge growth in warehousing facilities and dispatch facilities, a huge increase in delivery vehicles going on. And it's all very exciting and all very relevant to a transitioning community of people who are moving from going to the shops to having things delivered to their homes. Um, I think we're likely to see something which is a bit different in the future, where people will be encouraged to, I'm going to call it bulk buy. And by that, really, it isn't logical to buy 2 bars of soap or 2 tubes of toothpaste. I think there will be a change into encouraging people to buy 12 tubes of toothpaste and get one free. Um, and with things that are non-perishable and are rapidly consumable, it really can't make sense to have continuous delivery whereby people can, without thinking and certainly without any malice intended, cause a lot of damage to the planet because they're not creating ordering profiles which actually make any sense to anybody. So I think that there will be a big improvement, and actually one of the big improvements will need to be in the way people are thinking themselves, the way they perceive the impacts that they're creating on the environment. And nothing that we ever can say in terms of the parcel delivery business can have a uniformly correct answer, because countries have very different demographics, geographics, climate issues going on. Some people live in urban environments where the impact of small volume repetitive deliveries may be less severe than people that are living in the countryside or rural communities or very remote environments, where I guess people in very remote environments are not making some of the sustainability blunders that it's easy to make if you live in maybe an urban or much more compact scenario. So I think we'll see big improvements, and I think that'll help the industry, the parcel delivery industry, create much greater efficiencies, and the whole thing will go from that process, which I've referred to as a bit chaotic right now, to much more managed and functional and sustainable formats.
Looking forward now to the next Parcel+Post Expo, which is being held in Frankfurt in October this year. What's special about this year's event? And is there anything in particular that you've seen on the program or on the exhibitor floor that makes you think that postal CEOs definitely should attend?
So this year we go into the 25th anniversary show. The really exciting thing is it's the biggest Parcel+Post Expo that's ever taken place. That is a reflection, of course, of the fact that even during the pandemic, which has slowed so many industry sectors, including the exhibitions industry, down to a standstill, online shopping has, of course, showed a completely opposite trend. So I think the parcel and post delivery businesses are booming. The technology of improving efficiency, higher speed dispatch, higher speed processing, automation of delivery systems, and all of these things are increasing tremendously. And of course, inevitably, the whole last mile delivery, the robotics end of things, the early uh, possibilities for autonomous vehicles. It's all on show at the show, and it's more and more important for the industry to come and see this to be the what it is annual technology showcase for the things that are driving the business forward.
UKi Media has been a partner of the UPU for many years. How did it all start? And what do you think's next for this partnership?
Well, it's been a great partnership. It's been a very friendly partnership. It's been a very cooperative one, and it's been a win-win partnership from the very beginning, really. Initially, I first went to have a meeting with the UPU in 1997 as the show was gathering momentum for its very first running. And I felt it was important to make sure UPU were aware of what we were doing. Um, we ran the first two or three shows completely independently. And then UPU came along and said, look, we'd like to get involved with this. We'd like to run a conference session and cooperate, work with you guys because you are doing something which is very important for the post industry. You are the technology showcase for the business that we're in. And so I think the first get together with an official UPU participation was probably in the year 2000. So the third year really of the show, third or fourth year of the show running. And really it's been a great cooperation and, as I say, win-win for us and for the UPU. We're working together very logically and very successfully. We see a long-term future because there's great camaraderie and great productiveness in this relationship. And yes, I think it's definitely a long-term future for both of us.
Now, this year's UPU World Leaders Forum, which is made possible as part of this partnership with UKI, is dedicated to cross-sector cooperation. So what's your opinion about the importance of both posts and private logistics operators working together?
A long, long time ago, and when we first started to become active in the post industry, the posts were fundamentally sort of nationalized industries, or there was one post typically operating in any country. Maybe we could see at the time some courier companies going on doing very high speed, particularly document delivery. Nowadays, the world's changed, and obviously in all countries, certainly in Europe and not all countries in the world, but in a lot of countries, there is a lot of competition between different companies, with the posts competing with the newer generation parcel delivery and what were courier companies. And there's definitely great scope and benefit to be had from cooperation between different entities which might have different speeds going on within their businesses, different governmental maybe restrictions, where there's a connection into the private sector that can improve the efficiency of the businesses. And again, it comes back to the win-win. Of course, whatever we say, as I've mentioned before, we can't take the world and say, look, everything applies to every country because different political and demographic situations and commercial situations are going on. But quite clearly, the utilization and cross-fertilization of national industries with private sector companies, it's a very healthy transition and development.
My very first question in this interview was about your earliest memory of the Post. Let's flip that around. Looking forward to, say, 10 or 20 or however many years from now, how do you expect your mail to be delivered? I suppose, given what you said earlier, will there even be mail to be delivered?
Well, I think the first answer to your question is let's hope there is a world into which things can still be delivered. I have high hopes for common sense prevailing at leadership levels, and that we will be much the same as we are currently. Maybe perhaps we might even find that we're even in a better world than we are now. I think it's going to be down to this keyword, sustainability. Unfortunately, in amongst all the wonderful technical innovation that I might talk about, technical innovation has also caused great problems for the planet. And, one of the things I only realized fairly recently was that the unfortunate question of global warming is actually an irreversible question. We probably, most of us that are optimistic, live in the belief that maybe we can turn global warming back, and actually we can't. I think it's scientifically proven that where we are is where we're at, and there's no going back. So it is rather important, and I think we can see that with weather conditions and storms and fires and other things that are going on, that we can't continue to allow the planet to get too much warmer. So we really do have to be very realistic about what we're doing. And I think we really have to be realistic about slowing down parcel delivery, creating more optimized solutions for grouping packages together, and really looking at doing things which will help with that whole sustainability issue. Because if we don't, it's going to get hotter and we aren't going to like it.
Tony Robinson, CEO of UKi Media and Events, thank you very much for joining us on the UPU Voicemail podcast today.
Ian, it's been great talking with you, and thanks for inviting me to do so.
You've been listening to Voicemail, the official podcast of the Universal Postal Union. Subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast platform and you'll get each episode downloaded to the device of your choosing as it's released. My thanks to the team at the UPU for their help putting together this episode. I'm your host, Ian Kerr, and I'll look forward to your company next time on Voicemail, the podcast of the UPU.